Welcome, everybody, back to Segal Talks here at the Martini Segal Theater Center, the Graduate Center, CUNY in Manhattan, in New York City at the City University. And it is week 10 for the Segal Talks. We have been talking to artists and theater artists from around the globe to share and with them their experience and listen to them what that COVID crisis means for them personally as an artist, but also what the state of theater is in their countries. And really, we journeyed from Egypt and South Korea, Taiwan, and Lebanon, Belgium, Germany, Italy, Spain, Colombia, Argentina, Chile, and of course Germany, and many other places, Romania, Hungary, Poland, to hear an update on what is going on and what this crisis is doing us, and also what it reveals. It is, as Schreckner said, it's like a nuclear Fukushima catastrophe, but the roof of the reactor is open. We see the structure, we experience things. And of course, theater artists have been impacted the very first, and they will be most probably the ones who will struggle most, will not get back. If there ever was a reminder that society often thinks theater and arts is not significant, not essential, we have this now. When you ever thought you don't have space and money to do things, right now we don't have the space, there's no money. But still, theater has been, as we heard from our talks, a significant force in change, and how closely it was to times that we also experiencing now, where people are with outrage and justified outrage on the streets, and what role it played, whether it was South Africa or Cuba, Brazil, Chile, Tunisia, Romania, or in Poland. And it is a great privilege for us to listen in. Artists are closer, I think, to realities. The reality anticipate a future and help us to create meaning with them, and also tell complex stories that often go beyond the photo, the clip, the image. They really show us in time and sit us down to reflect and meditate. It's been a terrible week in New York City, and the demonstrations, the ongoing crisis, the murder of George Floyd, and again, it also has exposed what was already there, but perhaps people are listening closer. We had Joshua Sobol from Israel, who said, it's good to know that a life matters, that blood that's lost matters, and he mourned that what happened, and we do so too. We are sharing a statement from the Public Theater. I would like to read it. Oscar Justus also was with us. He himself had the coronavirus, was in the hallways of a Brooklyn hospital, not knowing if he would survive or not. And I know for him and his work, this is also a devastating a moment, not only for his theater, but also the state of the nation. So the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, and Breonna Taylor have demonstrated in horrific fashion the racism upon which our country was built. We mourn the loss of these Black women and men, and we are grieved and outraged by their death. Theater is for, of, and by the people, yet it has taken us far too long to proclaim the simple truth: Black lives matter. We must stand in solidarity with Black artists, Black staff members, and the Black community in all communities of color. We must do more, much more, to fight the racism that infects every institution in this country, us at City University included. We must recognize that this is a time of change, and that we need to be part of the change we want to see. We ourselves have to change in an authentic way, and we need to live up to our own ideals. We are going to focus next week, of course, on the situation in New York. Traditionally, we have 4, sometimes even 5 artists from around the world, and 1 New York or 1 American artist, but next week will be the other way around. We will have Jonathan McCrory from the Black National Theater, Tamila Woodard, James Scraps, Woody King Jr., and others with us. Also, the French philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy will be in between, who we scheduled some time ago. So it will be a very, very interesting week, and we hope you will be able to listen in. We got an Instagram from a New York actor who saw the announcement for the Segal Talk and said, no one cares about this right now. Your Segal Talks, people are dying. Be part of the conversation about justice. And I think he's right, he's true, but it's also not true and it's also not right. We do need to care about what happens in the world. Globally, we have listened to our friends and colleagues from Hong Kong, Haiti, Brazil, Lebanon, South Africa, and their struggle is also our struggle. Actually, America should turn away from isolation, from nationalism. Perhaps also this is part or one part of the problem, that it is not right to think that whatever happens here counts for so much more. And because we listened to our colleagues in Lebanon, Egypt, and Brazil, we have reasons to be even more outraged at the murder of George Floyd. There's a universal injustice, and America is no exception to this. And America really, really should be, because of its history, because the contribution it has made to the world. For centuries, the Black community has suffered more than others in this country, and it's happening at this moment again. Not only the coronavirus kills them next to the police killings, so does the racial politics in the US. Social and economic inequities, poor access to healthcare, discrimination in healthcare settings, greater reliance on public transportation, much higher numbers of jobs in healthcare and in the service industries, and big differences in employment were all factors leading to a much greater burden of COVID-19 disease and death among people of color, much, much higher numbers. Our president refuses to wear a mask like everyone else. He suggests we should inject ourselves with disinfectant. He's hiding in a White House bunker when it gets dangerous, or when he thinks or his people think it's dangerous. And he suggests that the US military should shoot American people, protesters, the army that is there to protect America, American people. This is the police. So, and then he is holding up a Bible after police clears a way to a church for him with tear gas, where peaceful protesters were exercising their rights and their voice for this moment where it is really the time to raise it. So this needs to change, and it has to change, and this will change. And we all have to look now also at the role. What does theater play? What role can the arts play and should play in the real, in the symbolic, and in the imaginary? And Jean-Luc Nancy will talk to us, I hope, next Wednesday. He wrote that beautiful, gave that beautiful talk, Why Do We Need Art? Why is art useful? And we will hear from him. And we need to listen to artists from other countries dealing with civil uprising, demonstrations, authoritarian regimes, censorships, and police killings in Egypt, Lebanon, Chile. As Guillermo Calderon told us, 400 demonstrators got shot in the eyes intentionally by the police, mostly students, to scare them from the police and the military. So in Cuba and Brazil, what happens is significant, and what artists found. So we need to know what we can learn from South Africa, from artists like Basil Jones, or Cuba, from artists like Tania Bruguera. And what theater, what performances did they create? How did it contribute to change? What worked, what didn't work, and how did it contribute to a change? The Segal talks also are always about art and making art, in the time of Corona and decisions we make. And we have with us a great young artist, Ashley Tata, who is here. Thank you for coming, listening also on this difficult week, and also for listening to that long opening, but I think it is important. Ashley, we have her here not only so we need to know how is it for a New York artist, a young emerging New York artist, a female, a woman artist director in the city, what has their experience anyway, but also what did she find, what does she do? And she did direct La Metaphors by Carol Churchill. It was commissioned and barred by Gideon Lester, and instead of canceling it, she's like, try to find a way with Zoom and with friends and with coders and new software they developed, and created something what I think is a piece of art and an interesting new way of a working and meaningful way, and to help us perhaps also get comfortable with these new times we are in. So Ashley, first of all, thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. So normally I say, what time is it? Because most of the time we have time changes, but you're the same. Where are you, and how are you doing?
Hi, Frank. Thanks for asking me to do a Segal talk. I've been tuning in to a few of them, and I think it's been exciting who you've had on, and I'm looking forward to the people who you'll have on next. Well, so thank you for keeping a conversation going. You know, obviously there is a lot to consider about right now, and I feel very uncomfortable saying I'm talking for, you know, the New York artists or whatever. I mean, I can talk about you know, a very specific experience that I've been having, but I am in I'm in Brooklyn right now at my apartment. So it is 12:12, which that means I've been here for 12 minutes. Uh, and I am, you know, I'm here. So that's been, you know, the past weeks, you know, 7 or 8 days in particular. I feel like that's the answer that I've been able to come up to that question. And you know, before the protest started, you know, it was just referring to coronavirus. It was more along the lines of, you know, I'm doing as well as possible given the circumstances. And I've found that my vocabulary has gotten a lot smaller in order to describe how I'm doing right now. So I've been trying to do a bit more asking other people how they're doing, and as a way to understand how people are able to articulate things right now and emotions right now. So, and I think it's really difficult, and sometimes impossible. So, yeah, yeah. So that's how I am. How are you doing?
Well, it's of course a complex time, and we all are struggling to find ways to do the right thing, and we don't know. As much as the world is uncertain, we really have to rethink everything. And I felt strongly we keep up our invitations we have planned for a long time this week. We had Ralph Pena from the Maï Theater Company talking about the Asian American Theater Company and how it is for them over decades, how complicated it has been to get a foothold into it, and how big the challenge is for him now with COVID. How will his company survive? What will he do? He's changing his theater into a TV studio and thinking about VR and connecting to theater artists from Asia. And he says it's dangerous, but also challenging. It reminds him the time he started out in theater when you didn't know what would happen to you. And he said it's also, of course, a chance in there. So where were you when that started? Are you under lockdown? Do you go out? And where were you when it all started?
Well, so we were working on Mad Forest. We had IRL. We were in rehearsal in studios at Bard College, up in Annandale-on-Hudson. And we had rehearsed about 2.5 weeks, I think, in a studio. We were rehearsing in the evenings with the company of performers. There are 12 performers. And I think it was March 11th. You know, there was another production that was happening on campus the same weekend as Mad Forest. And so in my head, I kept on saying, if they don't cancel that production, then we'll be fine. You know, we were aware of other schools that were shutting down and other productions that had been canceled. And I had been receiving, you know, text message and emails from colleagues in, you know, opera world and theater world and academia and all the different kind of places where I have connections and colleagues and friends and collaborators. And they were all reporting how their productions had been canceled or postponed, hopefully. So yeah, March 11th, Gideon called me and said that the other production that was scheduled to open the same weekend as Mad Forest, which I think was the first weekend in April, that would be postponed to the fall, and that the options that we had, I mean, he did present the option to kind of to go home for you know for myself and the stage manager. We're both the kind of professional people on the project who are currently had been involved on the ground on the piece. You know, we were living in this house in Annandale-on-Hudson together, and he said that, you know, we could go home and the designers could be, you know, could be released, could stop working. And he did, I will say, I mean, I hope this isn't speaking too much out of school, but he did say that everybody would be compensated for the work, like fully, which I think I bring that up just because of you know, in a kind of acknowledgement of Bard was in a kind of position where the producers were able to support us that way. I know that there are other organizations that weren't able to do things like that. So so I thought that was pretty great. But and then he also said, if or is, you know, he'd heard of a company in Oregon that was doing a radio production of something that they were in rehearsal for. He said, could you do something like that? And I said that I don't think that something, you know, Mad Forest, which takes place during the it takes place during the before, during, and after of the Romanian Revolution in the late 80s and then early, you know, 89 to 90 of Romania. So the first act, which takes place before the revolution and under the Ceausescu dictatorship, there are many scenes which are written in silence, and it's about the action that people take in silence when they're worried that they're being surveilled, and that the words that they say could condemn them to torture, death, you know, or losing job, any range of things. So I said that I didn't think that would maybe work so well in a radio play, though I'm sure somebody could figure that out. And I said, why don't we figure out how to do it online? And he said, great. And then, you know, the next call I made was to the design team. We had on the project, we had we had costume design, scenic design, sound design, choreographer, lighting design. And I called all of them, and we had a meeting, and I started kind of riffing on, I think that this is how lighting design, you know, to Abby Hope Brady, who's the lighting designer, I said, I think you could, you know, send lighting units to people, you know, to people in their homes, and you know, to the scenic designer Afsun Pajofar, I said, I think that you could create virtual backgrounds for them to be working with. And then to Dan Safer, who's the choreographer, I was saying, you know, I'm sure we could figure out how to choreograph for this, for whatever this frame is. And Paul Pinto, who's the sound designer, I was like, what would it be like if you were able to incorporate the difficulties of Zoom and of Zoom audio, like the gating issue and even like the lagging issue, and try to build that into the sonic design for the piece now. So, you know, very quickly we started, and Austa Hostetter, who's the costume designer, you know, there was a consideration of how much of the body must we now costume, you know, but, you know, kind of just started riffing in a very quick conversation with them all. And with them, most of them had their productions canceled at that point. And so everybody was saying, you know, I think it's perfectly fine for us to continue working on this project, and let's see how to figure it out. And then that night, Gideon and I met with the company of performers, and we asked them if they would be interested in continuing this. And I think that what was, I've talked to a few people who were working, especially with students during this period. And I think
they were all students.
Yeah, the performers are all students. Yeah. Ranging, I mean, there are freshmen to seniors. I mean, I think 4 of them in the company did graduate just, you know, last month. And you know, we also gave them the option to not continue with the project if they didn't feel like it, because I think that what has been really important during this period is to recognize that it's a big, you know, people are in shock. Young people are in shock. Well, I think everybody's is in some state of shock. And then the other thing was kind of, there was a decision that had to be made at one point about whether people were staying on campus or going home. And so that kind of created a whole lot of other type of complications. And so, you know, so for the most part, most of them said that they were interested in trying to figure out what the thing could possibly be, with like varying degrees of skepticism. They were interested in it. So, so we had a couple more rehearsals in real life, and then they declared the shutdown in the city. And I came back to Brooklyn right before the shutdown briefly. And, you know, and again, like in being in a very kind of privileged and lucky position, the folk at Bard, they said, well, you know, that house that you were staying in, there's nobody coming up there to stay there. So if you want, you can, you know, shelter in place there. So I ended up going back and doing the rest of the rehearsal for the Bard production there. I also, like I told you, I've been on crutches this whole time. So there was like some logistic things that made it, you know, a bit easier to be out of town. So we proceeded to do these rehearsals online, and that first week of rehearsal online was a big transition. And there was a lot of, you know, really having to listen to people and see where they're at and checking in with everybody. And just trying to figure out how to perform and a story, and how to create a sense of community and a sense of connection when everybody was now, you know, I mean, we had people in Oregon, California, and the middle of the country, and up and down the East Coast. So, yeah, and then I just came back to Brooklyn, you know, because then the other thing that happened, I mean, you know, like a lot of details in between, but then we ended up getting a transfer to Theater for a New Audience, and so we just performed that production last week, and so I came back to Brooklyn, you know, last week. So yeah. No.
So tell us a bit. So you started together as a group for 2 weeks, and then the shutdown happened. People went to their places. You got the chance and took it, the challenge. And others have said no. I know many things discontinued, whether they were paid or not. And you said, let's see if we find a form, a way to do something that's respectful to that play. Many people say it's the most significant play, you know, a European uprising, written by a British woman. There's a fantastic play about demonstrations on the street, and also brutality and killings, and what it does to families. So you decided to that the play was important. How was that play chosen? Why that play at this time?
Yeah, well, I mean, so Gideon and I had been talking about a play for me to direct in that semester for a while, and we'd gone through. I think this was the third play that we had considered me directing. You know, and just for example, one of the first pieces that I was interested in doing was an Orestes, which I think is a great. I mean, I think it's a great play to be done right now. But we decided against that, and then there was another play that we were talking about. So we, you know, there was. And then finally, kind of he had sent me, I was jokingly calling it my Gideon Lester reading list, where he was sending, like in the mail, he was sending me a book of plays a week or whatever, just to read and consider. And there's a Thyestes that Churchill had worked on that he sent me in a collection. And I, you know, I was interested in doing a Thyestes as well, but then, you know, having to do with roles and considerations of that, I decided that didn't, I don't know, it didn't seem as feasible. But in that collection was also Mad Forest, which I had seen a production of when I was in grad school. Another student, I think in a class above mine, had done a grad school production of it. And I don't have a really strong memory of it. But I flipped it open and I basically read, you know, the first couple of lines or whatever from every single scene, and there are a lot of scenes, but I certainly didn't read the entire play because I was under a time crunch, and I just needed to. So I said to Gideon, I said, you know, I don't know, I'm just reading a little bit of Mad Forest, and maybe that's, for some reason I felt like it's been overproduced or something, and I said, you know, maybe that's not really interesting. But I think actually, I mean, there are enough pieces just from reading it really quickly that made me feel like there was something in it that is very much speaking to our time. And again, I guess it's interesting. I mean, that was our time 4 months ago, which is certainly different than our time 2 months ago. It's certainly different than our time a week ago. It's certainly different than our time today. So, but our time 4 months ago, there was something that seems to be relevant and necessary about telling a story about a group of people who, a group of, you know, a lot of young people who for whom there is an uprising. They overthrow a brutal dictatorship, and then, you know, it's not like, I mean, the structure of the thing is great, because it's not like there's a revolution and then everybody's happy. You know, there's oppression and fear and the threat of, and the constant threat of violence. There is an act which is all spoken, this is the second act. It happens kind of, it's people, it's more in a documentary style theater where it's people speaking, you know, one would say directly to the audience, recalling the events of the actual 5 days or so of the revolution. So that in some ways is the most violent act, or the bloodiest act, even though it's people, direct audience addressing. And then there's a third act that goes back into a narrative form of these families that we've witnessed in the first act. And in that third act, you see kind of the repercussions of revolution, of what it means to be in a new landscape, and what it means to be people who are used to an old way of living, having to figure out how to adjust to the new landscape. And I think ultimately the responsibility that comes with with having lived through something that has created a new landscape. And that to me, I felt was really important to be talking about during an election year in particular. So yeah, so that's how we came to that play. I also had wanted to work with a video designer from the beginning, because I work with a lot of media in most all my work is, now for sure. And there wasn't a budget line for that. So I was going to do the video design, which was not going to be very sophisticated, but I was going to take it as an opportunity to kind of figure some things out that were interesting to me. And that was because, there's a lot that's been spoken about during the Romanian Revolution as a time when, TV and the use of television by the Ceausescu regime, but also the use of kind of amateur television and camcorders could convey both the message of the dictatorship, but also a message of the uprising. Again, themes that I don't think have dissipated at all in the 30 years since it was written. So I think so when we moved into an online space, that actually started to become more apparent and more obvious, and and then we did bring in a video designer, my friend Eamon Farrell, who I've worked with on a number of projects. He called me up and he said, I saw that you're doing this online. Who's going to do your video? And I said, boom, me, I think. And he said, well, if you want me to be a consultant, I can do that. And I said, well, I basically asked the folk at Bard to be able to add now a video design budget line, which they did. And we brought on Eamon. And Eamon is also, he's a wonderful artist and director, and he has a theater company called Anonymous Ensemble that have been doing they've been exploring online performance for a while now, and I've worked with them on another project. And Eamon is a professor, and one of his students who graduated this year was a double major in theater and computer science, I believe. And so this student Andy, he had kind of been floating the idea of working on a code to modify Zoom so that a computer keyboard could become a mixing board, and Eamon said, everybody was about to go into spring break. And so Eamon just said to him, if you want to go ahead and finish that code, now would be a great time to do it. And so our first week of online rehearsals, we didn't have the code. So we were doing things like trying to trick Zoom to take camera cuts, like coughing into a microphone so the camera would cut to the speaker, or things like that. And I think by the end of or maybe by the beginning of the second week of rehearsal, Andy had received the key from Zoom to allow him to, like the developer key to allow us to implement the code. And so then we were able to rehearse as if we were kind of like in a TV studio with this technology, which made editing just more fluid, and made it, made the script that I had then re-edited with different camera cuts more achievable by the person who was brought on to be the mixer, the video mixer. So that's that. And then, and the other thing I'll just say about the play is that obviously, it's a piece that was written for Carol and Mark Wing Davey, made it in collaboration with student actors in England, and then they went to Romania months
The
after.
first production was with students, right?
Yeah. The first production was with students, and those students and Carol and Mark, I believe, went to Romania and talked to Romanians and also I think Romanian theater students as well. And that's how they made the work, which then premiered in 1990, which is only, which is within the year of when the revolution happened. The revolution, it's December in that of 89. So it's really remarkable that, to me, it's remarkable that they did have in some ways had a sense of the history even as they were living it, but that production was student performed, and then that production also transferred to a professional theater and was in London and was also performed by student actors still. When it came to the States later on, it was performed by a professional company, by a professional company of actors. So I felt like it's a piece that allows for, a real company of performers. They play multiple roles. There's a lot of roles in the piece. I can't remember off the top of my head how many there are, but it's tens, more than tens, and we might be like something close to 30. Yeah. And it, and I could also do it and cast, cast with basically the students who came in who were interested in the material, I could kind of, we could play with who, who was playing who, and there could be real diversity in the voices of who was performing which roles, which I was excited by. So yeah, so I think for all those reasons that it seemed to be the right piece. And then what was really exciting was that as it moved online, there was a different type of breadth that came to it. And I feel in a lot of ways, the medium of Zoom or whatever this is really supported the content. And the only reason I really pointed to the Orestes in the beginning is that I don't think, Gideon is a artistic director, producer, and also a dramaturg. And I feel like both of us knew that that you couldn't just take, I wouldn't have felt comfortable taking any play and putting it online. It had to be, I don't think, for example, Orestes necessarily would have been something that I would have wanted to explore online, principally because of how to coordinate, like how to do a choral ode right now, to me seems a bit tricky, but I'm sure somebody will prove me wrong. Yeah.
Incredible. First of all, happy to hear that innovations come out of a university setting. That's what we all think it should be. It was for a long time. I think in Germany in the 60s or 70s, students theater was significant. The Peter Steins and Sadeks and Paimans of the world were student festivals. The Gießen School where I was, the Rainy Polish and Shishi Pop and Rimini come out.
Yeah, sure.
And I think this is now also a signal that an innovation comes out of a college setting, or giving space and making suggestions, but ultimately leaving artists in him. You anticipated something, that's atmosphere, what you felt that this play was right and you were right, and perhaps it's even much more prophetic. We hope when the elections come up, that things also will change in a dramatic way. And I like that you had an artistic idea first, that you had an aesthetic idea, and then you brought in a team of a software designer. So you have a traditional old form of centuries old of theater, and then you brought it together with Zoom, which is a new technology. It's a 21st century way of communicating that we all are experiencing. I never had a Zoom session before I started my talks here, but now we use it, and it's almost like an email seems like an old thing of the past. Why did you think the Zoom aesthetic would actually help to communicate the essence, the soul, the message of the play?
I don't. I mean, it was the only thing that was available to us. I mean, that's kind of so. But I think that so the aesthetic that we layered on top of it was the same aesthetic that. I mean, it was interesting to see what of the design choices we were able to translate into the virtual space. So there was, in the scenic design world, there was a whole. Afsun had come up with a really beautiful stage scenic design, and it was really elegant, and also kind of took us through the three different psychological and poetic and spaces of the world of the piece as we saw it. And so the first act was designed in the theater to be performed against a big kind of brutalist cement wall, and the performers had, I think, 6 feet of space from the wall to the downstage edge. So we staged the whole piece in that kind of in that space. And then over the course of the second act, the wall would rise, and we would use that wall as a projection surface to project some archival footage from the time, mostly because I felt like our audience doesn't have, when this was happening, even an American audience had more of a relationship to the events. So I felt like, we maybe needed to do a little bit of filling in that gap to bring our audience a little bit more into that headspace. And there would be a whole movement piece that happened kind of behind the wall as people were direct audience address, with microphones to create a kind of vocal intimacy to the events of the second act. And then in the third act, the wall is revealed, and the space, the wall comes all the way up, and the space that is revealed is a hospital waltz bucolic ballroom kind of setting. So it feels a little bit like an over gaudy party, or like you just got access to some type of, you know, beautiful ballroom and you don't quite know how to decorate it the right way, and it just feels a little sickly. And so that's where the third act was to take place. So originally when we moved online, Afsoon started by kind of taking the model renders and making those into virtual backgrounds. And we realized that that doesn't help the audience understand who's in the same room together or anything like that. So she went ahead and designed, you know, ended up thinking, I think more in terms, I mean, at one point at, you know, 2 a.m. or whatever, I get a text from her being like, this is great. It's like I'm a production designer, you know? And so she ended up designing something a bit more in that, with that eye, I guess. But she made, I think we ended up using something like 130 or 150 different virtual backgrounds that she created for each of the students to put up manually over the course of the show that are, you know, this is a room, and so these characters are clearly in this room and they're in this world, and then these characters are in this world together. But the thing that we were able to transfer were ideas about overall kind of ambiance of each of the acts, or color, temperature, things like that. All of that was able to transfer from the IRL production to her virtual backdrops, and how we ended up shaping the bigger aesthetic sense of the world. So tied into all of that was when I was thinking that I would make, you know, have some video design, there was an idea of it being the kind of, you know, 80s, 90s VHS, you know, kind of more old school, I guess, television aesthetic. And when we started working completely via video, that was a layer that Eamon added to everything. So the what is broadcast out to the viewer is in like a 4:3 ratio, which is that kind of more, you know, Instagrammable type of ratio, and with different types of kind of TV filters put on top of everything. And this is something that I've done in other projects where the chances that there could be a technical glitch, or maybe vocals could get out of sync, or things like that could happen, is add different type of filters or put something that's glitchy into the visual aesthetics, so that it makes the medium more forgiving for when those things actually do happen. So yeah, I mean, the thing of Zoom, I mean, I didn't think that the Zoom, you know, these cameras that we're working with have, you know, don't have a great depth of field, and there's so everything becomes two-dimensional in a very extreme way very quickly. So we kind of had to rethink everything about what we were doing. The scenic design had to become that way accordingly. We started thinking more in terms of collage aesthetic and kind of a cubism, you know, how do you break things apart and lay them out like this, rather than doing anything that has to do like that, you know? And I think even in some respect, like Dan's choreography changed in that way. You know, things ended up being a lot about this and less about that, although there are some places where this becomes a really interesting place to look at as well. And there are a couple of places where, like, you know, the actor will put a bottle like right here, and that does a different thing, but different than in film, you know? So it became interesting to see, how is it different than film, and how is it different from theater, and how is it really its own thing? And then you just tried to explore what was interesting about that. And I think that, you know, what's interesting to me also is to take the exploration to the edge of where the technology kind of starts to break down, and then you can find the art in it, I think, or I mean, because I guess it's the human fallibility that gets put into it at that point. So, but then I guess the thing that Zoom does necessitate, and that also the larger reality of being in isolation necessitates, is, you know, nothing could be made out of the recognition that nobody is in a space together. So for example, the scene where two characters hug each other, how to do that was a big question. And we did a thing that I think weirdly is touching, because it's not performed out of the acknowledgement that nobody can be together. So what does it feel like if I can't hug another person, is it at all satisfying to hug myself and have that kind of felt experience maybe transferred in some way? And the scene, and then when we did the production at Tafana, in the course of the month between having develop the piece at Bard, and then developing it for Tafana, Andy, this coder. And I will say the other thing, you said about the college, the relationship of an academic institution to creating work. I mean, I find it important to kind of underline that the other thing that we were able to do that I feel like a lot of academic institutions aspire to, but it's not always seen, is a symbiotic relationship between different departments, and specifically in this case between computer science and theater. Andy was, we've had conversations about the thing that he's basically coding for the problems that I'm creating. So the person with the visual idea or whatever is saying, this is what I would like this thing to be able to do, and then creates a problem that then he can go and try to solve, right? And I think that is a thing where I've felt that too often in academia, everything is so siloed that people are either solving problems that already have solutions to, or having to create problems that don't need to be solved, So that was a really, and it is true that, I've frequently thought that we were very, very lucky for this to be happening at Bard, which has some type of support, financial support, and also they had the staff support, because the production team was also, they immediately jumped on the problem, and they said, okay, well, we can figure out how to send duplicate props to these different parts of the country. We can figure out how to send green screens to everybody. We can order Bluetooth headphones for everybody and send it out. And and without that support, it wouldn't have been the thing that it ended up being. I do think that there's a lot that people can do without a production team behind them in this medium, which I think is also important. But we were definitely lucky that we were in that position exactly when this happened. Right. But the only other thing I wanted to say was in the month between doing it at Bard and then doing it at Tafana, Andy and Eamon had figured out how to basically create a situation where a performer could be live performing and be in the same square as another performer. And so there's a scene that happens late in the play where a ghost appears. And so we called these two actors in to do a rehearsal before, to do a tech rehearsal, and they didn't realize what we were doing. And so one of them I think is in upstate New York, and the other is in a different part of the state of New York. And so they're performing the scene, and it has to do with the ghost basically asking a nurse if she would like to go with him. And he kind of, and so they were performing the scene together, and then he kind of looked to his computer and he started freaking out because he saw that the two of them appeared to be right next to each other. And it was this really incredible moment where also all of us realized that we haven't seen two people in real time being in the same space together in at that point, almost 2 months. So that was kind of an amazing moment. And also very exciting for the implications that there could be. But I also think that the play ended up fundamentally conveying something that had to do with people really trying to connect with each other through space and time, and all the obstacles that are being put in front of them, whether it be systemic or physical. So so that obviously transferred as well. I was also very lucky that I did, through most of the process, I was able to kind of have short email exchanges with Carol Churchill, which was really really? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had emailed her when we were hoping to make the move online, just to make sure that it was something that she felt made sense or would be, at least in theory, supportive of, and she was, and it was really, that was really nice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How incredible. You touched already on so many things, how to be together in one room, one space when you're not together, but Zoom found a way with altered code that Zoom company collaborated with a theater artist to change the system basically of the code and to adapt it, that you found a way to express or to create a piece of art. And I think what you did is a piece of art, to express out of necessity, not by choice, something that the play in a way is all about. And And I can also see a line. I see, you know, the work of Castor van der Volksbühne. There's work you worked, I'm sure, with Robert Woodruff. Your work with Jay Scheib, Daniel Fish, and I saw your Marie-Louise Fleischer, the Purgatory in Ingolstadt, where you had the video work. It was also, I think, students, acting students, Marymount, I think, if I remember right, where it was close to the aesthetic. Also, you created for there. So these were all, like, in the good sense, experiments, research, finding a way. They filmed each other. It was so much about, you know, teenage angst, so densely, highly emotional, charged moments. But then you created the Met Forest, which in a way for our viewers, of course, I should have told you, prepare a clip and show it to us, but it's not possible anyway. But it's almost like a graphic novel setting, you know, with like photos manipulated in some kind of a drawn line of a pop art, recalling early computer games, recalling early MTV. But on the other hand, the fastness of it, the shared screens, a bit like the houses of Reza Abdou in some of his plays, when he had things parallel happening in the on stage. He was also a visionary in that way. So you created something that somehow is a new form. Do you think, and I would like to have an honest answer, do you think it was a better production than it without Zoom?
Before I address that, better. Okay, I'm gonna write down better so I don't forget that word. I would just like to say that the thing that I think is very important about, I mean, because of the tech and the code and everything, we were able to create the visual experience of people maybe being in a space together. But one of the really important things in working with the performers that you know, that I continue to be incredibly impressed with their ability to do this is how they had to have an intense amount of energy in activating their imagination in order to put, you know, their colleague who they were, you know, very close with a few months ago right here, so that they could really, you know, and we had actioned the text and everything, so they directed this action of, you know, to seduce right here, and then they could put their other colleague right here. But that, you know, that kind of energy, because at first there was this whole conversation about what is it to act in this type of void, and so there are a lot of, you know, I was referring them to very early silent films where in a lot of cases it was a performer who's alone behind a camera with maybe a director yelling at them off camera, you know, but and there is nobody off camera for you to perform with other than like the, you know, than the leg of the camera or something. So I think that but I feel like the activating of the imagination is also something that couldn't happen, that made this possible. Like the thing couldn't have happened without that, with the active imagination of the performers and the immense amount of energy that went behind that, and then also the kind of like trust and imagination of all of the collaborators, including the production team. And I also think that's just something that I'm hoping that this period allows as an opportunity, is for everybody to just to be much more active in their imagination of, I mean, that's kind of the most important thing about living in an unknown period, I think, is that, I mean, it can either be dangerous and arresting and, you know, and can just kind of paralyze you, or it can be something that gives you the opportunity for hope in a way. So, and they did an incredible job of doing that and staying in that world while they were performing. I mean, as far as it being better, you know, I think that I don't know. I quite liked what we ended up making. I mean, I actually did, and there was a bit of, you know, trying to convince some people to watch it. I mean, I think even with you.
Yes.
Which, thank you for watching it, and thanks to everybody who watched it, because but I think is, I don't know, I because you know, I think that whenever I'm making something, I'm never really able to see what I think what I think about it until it's pretty much over, you know, or even beyond over. So I'm not entirely sure. I do think that the scenic design would have been pretty great. I think that the sound design was going to be really great. I think I think all the elements would have been really great. But I think that, I don't know, there's something about this form that I really do actually have an affinity for, and especially in the very beginning, to me it was important to make this thing. Well, first of all, because I just don't know what else to do. I mean, I've always only ever I just make a lot. Like I'm very regularly in a rehearsal room in some capacity, and so I just didn't. I really couldn't imagine going into isolation and not having something to be making. I mean, I thought I know a lot of people are and have done, and I'm doing that more now. But and I also felt, in my experience, making theater, some form of theater, making something is how I basically survive through, and I felt like it probably would be very useful for the students in particular, and for the entire design team, anybody, and the production team, if we had something that we could work on while we were going into isolation. So to me, it was kind of like this, this is how we survive something, is we keep on making things. And but I feel, but then I also felt like it was that, and then the next thing became, is it something that's viable? Like, is it something at all that people would maybe consider watching? Because I also think increasingly right now, as far as the state of theater, I mean, I think in particular in America, obviously there are a lot of massive changes that hopefully are coming. But I do worry about how long we will have to be in some version of isolation, and when audiences will feel comfortable coming back to the theater, and how dependent upon we are our audiences. That makes things complicated. So I kind of feel, as in an existential kind of way, that there is some necessity to acknowledge that this could be a version of theater that producers could potentially get behind, and that audiences could potentially get behind, and performers and designers could potentially get behind. Because I don't know how we as the theatrical community survive this period, especially if, depending upon different projections, we could have to become very flexible with going indoors for a period of time, off and on for an extended period of time. So for me, it was like, can we make something that's at all viable? And I've been incredibly heartened by talking with a number of theater makers who saw it and, were inspired to start thinking about how they could also make for something like this form. And I've also seen, those students, actually, the students in Mad Forest, they still had to finish school. So they were still making projects, and they've made some really, really wonderful works since then. And I've seen some of it. And I also have started to have conversations with them about what really this form means. Like, what is it? Why does something feel live on this? And why doesn't it feel live? What's
your answer?
I mean, there seems, I mean, so it's, some of it seems ineffable, but I feel like, on the Wednesday afternoon showing of Tafana, we had a tech malfunction. So we had to go offline for, I think it was like 7 minutes. And that, I mean, people felt like that was an indication of it being live. And also, one of the things that I asked when we moved online was that we have a chat feature going. So the audience is able to talk to each other about the show. And I'm taking all that chat, not all of it, I'm taking some of the chat that I feel would be useful to the actors, and I'm dropping it into their own feed so that they can have some sense of the feedback from the audience, so they don't feel like they're only performing in a void. So I actually feel like, I mean, the chat feature, I guess, is kind of controversial. I think some people really don't like it. I myself don't know that I would be an active participant in the chat feature in other experiences. I have been and I haven't been. But I think, but what I have known is that does create a feeling of a sense of community, and just people, audience members being able to talk to each other in real time makes them see that it's a live experience. And I do, and also, we did implement some, very kind of, theatrical kind of performance gestures, like having one of the performers, Bill, he costume changes into the role of the grandmother, Avista, like in front of the camera. And if you were to make I mean, maybe if you were to do something in the can, you wouldn't necessarily show that, you know? And there are enough like little glitches here and there that I think give it the sense of liveness. And I do feel like I mean, I've been taking on a bunch of things online, some performances, you know, some, you know, your talks, some, I've been doing a lot of meditation. So, you know, it's like online meditation sessions. And there is something that just, I don't know if it's clear, if it's as simple as me saying to myself in my head and reifying that this is happening live, that makes it feel different. But I do think that there is an energy that forms around a group of people, even if they're spread out literally all over the world, acknowledging that they are experiencing something that has an emotional reverberance at the same time. And I also, I mean, it also makes me fascinated by why is that so important? Why is that the substitute for being, why is that right now something like a substitute for being in the same space together? But yeah, but I'm very happy that these students are actually having conversations and real thoughts about what the media is. What does it mean to talk directly to camera versus talking to somebody off camera? You know, like, who are you implicating if you speak directly to camera? So that, and, you know, and these are undergrads, and what that means to me also is that they're taking it on as a real kind of form because it's all that's afforded them right now, to some extent. And I think that that's really exciting. And I think that it should be acknowledged. And because it's not, you know, I mean, because it can be taken legitimately if it's dealt with legitimately, you know. Oh, so better. I don't know. It's different.
No, it's true. It didn't feel like a compromise. It did not feel like a filmed performance or, you know, going through some motion. I think you, as you said, you found a form. It's astonishing to think that you were in confinement, and I think you had a fracture in your hip. You couldn't even move, but you created a big work with, I guess, I don't know, 20 people involved as a new form of production. Using media, manipulating software and media, teaching your students and actors about what it means to have performance media, but also the media itself, and still trying to find a way to give a meaning out of that play that has something to say. It is an election year, you know, to say this is something, and perhaps that message in one way came through very, very clearly. I think also. To me. So let's talk about that software or that form. Will that be, is every drama department in America calling you? Will that be shared? Can Ralph Pena at my theater company, can he, because he said 2 days ago, he said, we change our theater in the TV room. I got a little bit of money. I cannot afford not have to work with my people. I do not know what to do. I'm sure we will find something. You found something. Will that be shared? And what's the idea behind it? Will that, you know, that you were the first to do it, as far as I know. But what will happen to this form that almost is like not an acting way of acting or directing? You know, we have all these different schools of from Viewpoint and Brecht and Stanislavski, and now maybe there's the Matt Forrest way of doing something. But how is that? What's on your mind?
So I think that it's yeah. I mean, you know, we do talk about it quite a bit. Like the team does. I mean, I do. Like, there are. Let's see. Well, so everybody knows. I mean, if anybody's tuning in, but not if. Sorry, it's Frank. We are going to be. We're supposed to have a panel with the kind of team of Mad Forest talking about how we made it. That was going to actually happen this week, but we postponed it for. I'm not entirely sure until when, but we've postponed it for now, and. I think that information about that can be found at Bard's website if people are interested in kind of a longer form conversation, also with the entire team, because like I keep on trying to emphasize that it is the result of an entire team working on this thing that made it possible, and a bunch of people who were not, I mean, they were scared or overwhelmed. Like Vanessa, the stage manager, she kept on, I mean, she figured out how to stage manage with no stage, right? I mean, this is, so she, you know, she also, you know, I mean, in some, I mean, maybe invented it too, but she created a way of working without being in a room with people. You know, she called a show. I think she had, at one point she was like, you know, she had different, you know, lines that she had to be listening to. And at one point she was like, you know, I do not have 3 ears, so you cannot add another comm feed into this, you know, into this space. So, I mean, so it's just, it's really, so that in conversation, whenever it happens, I do think will be interesting. But one of the things that we've talked about with, you know, with, for example, in anticipation of that panel is I know that for a bunch of us, there is something that's really important about getting the idea of the technology out there, so that especially smaller companies don't feel that there is a bar to entry in order to do this type of work. Because like I say, to me, this is an existential thing within the community, is that I mean, I feel like I'm absolutely respectful of people who are just making a decision not to make right now, and who are kind of, you know, I heard Anne, heard you interview Anne, and this idea of Zots and the kind of gathering up energy before making the move. I absolutely agree with that as well.
Eugenio Barba.
Yeah.
Quote, who actually will join us in June 25th, I think. Yeah.
Yes, and everybody should tune in for that. Yeah. So I mean, I absolutely believe in that, and I respect that, and I also respect the kind of the hesitation around kind of making things just for the sake of making things, or making things for the sake of like putting a flag on the moon, or something along those lines. This felt like it happened very naturally, as far as, you know, the medium works with this. Let's just keep going. This seems to be the next right, you know, it seems to be the next obvious step to take at every single step of the way. So, and again, like for me, looking further out, I just see, you know, many artists who I don't know how we survive this, if there isn't a way to make something. And there are many small companies who won't be able to survive what looks like an extended period of not producing. So for me, it seems really important to get the technology out there, or the idea of the technology out there, the idea of the acceptability of something like this form, whatever it is. And you know, what I did, I mean, it's very much, like you said, it's very much tied to an aesthetic that I already am interested in, based off of work that I do in the real world, and influences, you know, other people I've worked with and everything. So there are plenty of ways to do this. And I, you know, a young director just sent me work that they did on a production, and they took a whole different aesthetic way of working on it, and they used a completely different technology in order to do it. So there are plenty of ways to do this type of work, and keep it relevant, and keep it exciting, and keep it necessary. So I feel like we're interested in promoting the idea that it is possible, and that you know, smaller companies like my I mean, I think that I feel like having conversations, you know, keeping the information out there is what's important. I also do think there becomes a bit of like, you know, to what extent, like, I mean, I haven't been approached to direct anything.
Yeah, tell us a little bit. I want to ask you that. As far as I know, last year you are a great director. I think you didn't. As far as I know, you didn't direct. Had your job as a young woman director. I don't know what came now out of this. How is it for someone to break into the industry? I mean, we hear, of course, right now, you know, there's the posting from Griffin Matthews about Broadway is racist. His experience at ART with Diane Paulus. She also answered him. Would love to have both of them here and talk about it, but the idea that it's impossible really to in a way to get through. How is it for you? Do you get offers, and is it? Did anybody, after this big review, which you also got from the New York Times, have you been approached by anybody?
No, I mean, I have no, but there's also a pandemic, right? So I'm not, you know, and that's where it became very apparent to me that that there's a lot of, I mean, that there isn't, you know, people are, I think, being very still. I mean, now people are being very still and reflective for uh, for a whole other reason. Which, yeah, well, and but you know, don't think that people are producing a lot right now, or I mean, I don't, at least I haven't seen a lot of that right now. And there had been statements, you know, about theaters not producing until, I mean, I feel like that, you know, like the Guthrie until like March of 21, I think is what I had heard at one point. So, and that's why, I mean, for me, it's more important to try to propose options for making work right now for theater artists. And I think the other thing that's interesting maybe is that the theater artist who, in a lot of ways is a multidisciplinary kind of artist, can like what it is that defines what it is to be a theater artist can maybe expand right now, you know, that we can take on multimedia work and you know, that all the tools that have made us survive in different circumstances, in like downtown theater circumstances where you're just kind of trying to figure out how to make things work without a lot of resources. All of that allows, and I mean, I know in my case, and in a lot of the artists who I respect, a lot of the theater artists who I really respect also have a pretty healthy dose of consideration of music and performance art and visual art and all that type of work is, you know, a real, you know, multiple media. So I do think that, I think that part of it is us reimagining how we're taking space as theater artists in the larger artistic landscape, to not kind of make it an idea about specializing us onto, you know, either just Broadway or off Broadway, or, you know, but that there are other places where we can occupy and make and write stories and tell stories and give voice to stories. So I try to, I mean, that's what I'm considering right now is how can I mean, I'm talking to collaborators about work that we want to make. We don't, you know, but there's no way to plan for it. Like there's no, we'll make this work at this theater or we'll get this grant. I mean, there's just no way of planning for things as far as I know right now, or I haven't figured out how to do it. So I'm working with a lot of collaborators who I've had, you know, traditions of working with before, and just, you know, continuing to think of what the development of this project will look like, the development of that project will look like. Yeah. I mean, I've been very lucky that I have, you know, I've worked with a lot of directors who I deeply respect and who are incredible mentors and colleagues and now friends. And I think that I've made a lot of works that I think are really great and have been, you know, and have been recognized. I think that what a director does is, I think that it's confusing sometimes to a lot of people, actually. So yeah, so I mean, if anybody wants to hire me, that would be cool. But
well, you did get a review in the opera, the contemporary opera you directed, and the New Yorker was the line. It's one of the first masterpieces of the 21st century. So refer to the music, but also to the staging. But still, for you to break into the, is the New York theater system, how it's set up, working? Is it working for young female directors? What is your experience in surviving in New York as an artist?
I mean, I think that the New York system is really difficult for artists, period. So, and I think that you know, there's just yeah, and I think that I feel like I mean, these are not new ideas or anything, but I think that there's a I think that there's not as much nurturing of local artists as like there seems to be a bit of presenting work that has been proven somehow, and I guess by proven that means has audience interest, and I think that maybe there is not a lot of risk taking and by risk taking by subject matter and also by the voices who are creating work. And I do think that there's a bit of I mean, I found it difficult to I found it difficult to be considered like a generative artist as a director. I think that that's something that that isn't considered a lot in our system. And I do think, and I think that with I think that funding resources become smaller and smaller, and I think there isn't I think that it's difficult to figure out how to get the funding to make your work in order, it's this kind of catch-22. But I also think that that's a larger I think that being an artist, period, in here is very difficult. And and it's a big, there's like a lot of it has to do with kind of values and also what we hold up and what we cherish. So yeah, I don't know. I try not to get stuck. I mean, I will say that one of the things that I've been thinking about is that there's a lot, doing something online, you don't have to pay for real estate yet necessarily. So there is, I've been, I think that there's an opportunity again, if something like this is somehow taken seriously, meaning that people are interested in seeing it, and it can address, there's something about the decentralization of the work too, and where people can make work from, then you can make a work without having to pay rent, which that could open up a world of possibilities. Rent for a theater, I mean. So I yeah, I mean, I just I feel I don't know. I feel like it's, it's really hard, but it's also, I mean, it's like what I know how to do. And I think that I am actually, I think I'm good at it. And so I'll keep on, keep on making as long as, yeah, I mean, I don't really know what else to do really, but I also think it's weird right now. This is the first week really that I've been out of rehearsal since all this happened. Cause even in between the two Mad Forest things, I remotely shot a music video, which was like an interesting experience. So it's I'm finding that like, my way of processing kind of everything, it's a little bit amputated right now because I don't have the outlet of like thinking about how to make a piece of work and thereby, filtering, emotions and psychologies and states of the world and structural societies and things like that through a lens of making something. So yeah, it's it's an interesting experience, but I don't, but I'm like, I am cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic that there's a lot of energy right now that I keep on telling myself that I don't have the information to know that the future is going to be worse than the past, and that what was the past is that was a different world that's done with. So, and without the knowledge to know that the future is going to be worse than that, I should just remain as rigorously present as possible and try to figure out where my energy can be best directed to serve the greater good. Yeah, that doesn't answer what it's like to break into the field,
I do hear you. You said this play, you had the intuition it would be the right play for the time we are in. Why do you make theater? What motivates you to live this hard life?
Again, I mean, I don't.
What's your idea about theater in general? Why do you do it?
I mean, I do it because it's real. It is like weirdly all I've done. I grew up, I mean, even when I was a kid, I grew up in different places all over the country. And I would kind of like, I would always like organize my friends around some, group imaginary reality or whatever, and you know, tell stories and start scripting things. I mean, I started doing theater in schools where there wasn't actually theater. You know, I'd take a history project and say, let me write a script about, you know, the creation of the atomic bomb, even though I didn't know. But so I just like, I don't know, for whatever reason, it seems natural to me. And so, but I will say that I have always, whenever I'm working on a piece, and from, you know, from before high school to through high school to, you know, to anything that I make, it is always interesting to me, or necessary for me to approach it from a humanist perspective, I guess is maybe the best way to articulate it. And which is, you know, how are we telling stories of people that bring people closer together because they're able to, because they're experiencing people in a way that maybe they haven't before, or given the space to feel uncomfortable around people in a way that they haven't before. So I mean, that's, I guess that's why I make work. And I do, you know, and it is the case that most of the you know, I was thinking during Occupy, I was making Good Person of Szechuan, and, you know, and kind of would go down to Occupy and you know, we actually did, I forgot that we actually one of the, Jess was the dramaturg on that. And I forget that we actually did, you know, we invited people from Occupy to watch one of our productions of Good Person of Szechuan. I mean, I find that for, you know, I can't work on a piece if it doesn't somehow resonate with what I'm like, you know, seeing going on in the world. And again, that's a very limited perspective, you know, based off of, you know, my point of view. But that kind of gives me the energy to make. And then just aesthetically, in a larger sense, the reason that you know, I was a musician before I really started focusing on theater. And the reason that I really became interested in theater was because I saw, even without really knowing what theater was, I did see the potential for it being something where, you know, music, visual art, performance, history, the examination of social structures, all these things could exist together in a form, and that it would also that it has the potential of affecting people in a way that bypasses the brain, and so their whole body becomes a receptor for information and experiences and knowledge in a way that we don't traditionally appreciate in our society. So that's why I kind of also over the years have become more interested in a multimedia approach, is because I feel like there's this kind of, you know, when the whole person, the whole body is immersed in experiences, you know, it's kind of like, it's like living in a field of poetry rather than, you know, reading poetry on a page or something. So that's, I think that's why I do theater, the form of theater. And that's why also I get frustrated when we're kind of told where theater belongs physically and topic wise, and by whom, you know, who is allowed to tell the stories that are presented in theater. And for whom. That's the thing that's I think really thrilling about potentially the online form. And again, there's a lot of conversation about who's able to have access to the internet, which is also an appalling conversation. But there is also, you know, when we streamed the event on Wednesday, at least, there were 1,600 viewers who watched most of the thing. And these were not people who were like checking in, checking out. I mean, I was watching, and they watched at least, I think at least an hour and a half of the performance, stayed online. And they were, you know, they were watching from, you know, from Bangkok, they were watching from Romania, like we were getting notes from Romanians, you know, they're from Ghana, from Germany, from, you know, I mean, that to me is really thrilling. And that's where the real potential for who can see the work. And then also, like I say, the you know, the physical structure of the theatrical machine is decentralized as well. So you can have your collaborators all over the world. So that I think is really thrilling and has a lot of potential. and I also think that there's a different kind of audience that maybe we can reach out to. Like there are people who are used to coming to a theater in New York City and sitting down and having this type of experience, but there's also an audience that maybe is more interested in engaging online work in a different type of way. Like people who do want to have a chat in the middle of a performance, or who have online kind of persona, or communities, and I think that's exciting. I don't think that, I actually spend a lot of time being incredibly grateful for life in the theater. I think it's regularly, I can't believe the people who I get to work with, the places where I get to go because I make theater. Like I've traveled around the world solely because I make theater. I get to work with incredibly compassionate, generous, collaborative, super intelligent, talented human beings. I'm really, I don't, it's kind of like I've had conversations with people about, people who leave New York, and I've lived here now. I moved here in October of 2001. So, and it's kind of like, you can get more space for less money, but you don't also get to go to, to a gallery show that a friend of yours has made. Knowing artists in all different media and experiences is it makes me feel like a fuller human being. And there are a lot of ways to feel like a full human being, but this is the way that I feel like a full human being for now.
We now already know that it changed your work, or the way also you did work with this kind of invention, what you guys did. But did you change as a person, that experience of COVID, of the lockdown, even though you worked hard almost every day? Do you feel something has changed?
Practically, I guess I've been meditating a lot more. I already had a meditation practice, but that would be the thing when people say, "What are you doing right now?" I'm like, "Well, I am meditating a lot more."
So every morning when you get up?
Oh yeah, well that was the case before this, but
What do you do? Tell us a bit.
What do I do with my meditation?
Yeah, when in your day, how does it work? How do you do it?
Okay, well, right now, weirdly, my day has been, I've been getting up between 5 and 5:30 every morning, mostly because of the birds, which is really incredible. And I sit for 20 minutes, and then I have a whole stretching thing that I have to do. So I have arthritis and whatever. I have to do a whole stretching thing, and then I do I make a list of people who I'm going to check in with during the day, just to see how they're doing. And they decide over the course of the day when I'll check in with whom and things like that, and whether it'll be via text or Zoom or phone call. And then I kind of get into the news, and then I do some reading on, I'm reading a few different, I will say that the thing with my meditation practice that's changed is I haven't really studied a particular type of practice. I've just, sat and breathed and tried to be still. But now I am doing a little, it's still a mess of different traditions that I'm looking at. But I have been doing this course on the Bardo, which I find really interesting right now. So I've been doing a course. It's contemplating that kind of experience of change, and the end of a period, and what the beginning of a period can be, and how much control we don't have over all of that. And then I've also started this new practice that I've started is we're studying Dogen, which I've never read, so I'm excited about looking at that. And then I usually, and then in addition, most days a week now, I also do a sitting at the end of the day as well. And I also have to, I have to kind of shut things down at the end of the day and do some reading and do some writing at the end of the day to just kind of shut everything down. Yeah, and the middle of the day is mostly spent, maybe going outside, contemplating going outside, to get some kind of exercise, like on my crutches. I do crutch abouts, and you know, and also I'm donating right now to different organizations and causes and things like that, where I feel like it can be helpful. And I'm also asking people to send me work to read and look at, because, you know, I used to go see a lot of work and hear a lot of work and go to museums and galleries and friends openings and things like that. So so I'm asking people like who have plays, like some, you know, friends have been sending me plays that they're working on, and videos that they're making and things like that, just so I can, you know, have a conversation with them. And I do have a lot, you know, yesterday morning I spent all morning talking to people in Berlin about maybe like that, which is exciting. And I've been talking to other people about, you know, potential projects, and they kind of break down into two categories. They either break down into categories where we say they have to happen in real life, so therefore we're willing to think of developing this for 5 years if that's what it will take before we can be together in a real space, or weirdly this material will work better online. Like there's one project in particular that I think actually could work better online, so maybe we'll pursue it in that way. And then, you know, there are two, like, you know, smaller, I'm doing something with the, you know, Beth Morrison Projects is doing a new initiative for an online experience. And so I'm working on that right now. And I have, before all this began, I got a residency from this space in Red Hook that Andromeda Chalfant and M. Sharkey are running. And, you know, and that has changed what that residency can look like. And I hope that I'll still be able to have a residency as a generative artist. And the piece that I want to make is like, it's an installation, like kind of sculptural space, sound space that also is a VR opera layered on top of it. So there'd be a narrative VR space that is in a headset, and you know, it could be experienced by a single person. So maybe that's something that is isolation or social distancing compliant. So I'm, you know, hoping that I'll be able to work on that in August maybe. But you know, but it is very, I think it's you know, whatever you think is going to happen at the beginning of the day doesn't end up happening 12 hours later. So I'm kind of just being open to whatever might happen. And then trying to be really vigilant about, you know, again, about, you know, my friends and my you know, people who I really care about, checking in with them. And also trying to figure out how to make sure that you know, come November we're voting somehow.
Voting, and we are working. Listen, Ashley, this is incredible. Thank you for sharing, and we get an insight of your racing mind, and you had to slow down for us a little bit, but really thank you for sharing. You know, it's a great what you found when you didn't stop what you were doing and try to find a new form, and you did. And I think it opens up in a way a new world, as you also say, globally. There's theater without audience, there's theater without scenery, there's theater without scripts, whatever. Now we have a theater without a room. Who would have said that? The definition by Peter Brook always where two people meet in a room and one person watches, or even nobody watches, and you have theater. And we don't have that room anymore. Something has changed. Software is coming in, the digital, it used to be the light, became digital, the great work of Robert Wilson, which he anticipated already. It was an analog, but the digital soundscapes that came up, the digital film work, and now we have the digital software helping us with cues, stage managers running a stage without a stage, and perhaps even busier than before. Productions happened with 20, 30 people and no one is in the same room. These are incredible times, and we are part of it, and you really are shaping this. Again, congratulations. Any foundation is looking, give some money to this group of people to finish the software so they can license it out for little money to all companies, so you have something out of it, and really support this. And also, you know, anytime happy to host a Hull round session with the team and about how to use that software. If that's thinkable, let us know. Did Carol Churchill see it?
She did, yeah, she did.
What did she say?
She was really kind, and she said it reminded her she said it brought her right back to being there, and and the other person who's, I mean, she you know, she was really she said it brought her right back to being there, and the time when they made it, and And she said it felt very Romanian, which I took as a compliment. And the other person was Anthony MacDonald, who was the original designer on that production. I just worked with him at the Armory, and so I've been in correspondence with him quite a bit, actually. And I also sent it to him, and he also watched it and had a very similar response. So I feel really, yeah, like I say, I mean, I'm on a daily basis, I'm pretty blown away by how by the people that I get to that I've had the fortune of being able to speak with, including you, Frank.
Oh well,
so
I
thank you
wish
very
I
much.
would be as significant as the other. But listen, congratulations! You should be so proud of what you did. It's a model to look at, and what you found, what you created, your life, you're dedicating to the work of art and theater, and to help us all to come to terms with what does it mean to Zoom? What could it be? Are there possibilities? Is it, to see that there are possibilities we haven't thought about, and really, and stunning, it comes out of a tiny little group, the big Broadway commercial complex. We should have an interest how this should go with 5, 6, 7 billion of money made in a year, and they haven't come up with something like this. So it's incredible, and we will see where it goes from. And then next week again, we will focus on what is happening here in New York. Of course, Ashley's experience of COVID, of the lockdown, is a peculiar one connected to her as an artist and their time. Everybody experiences it differently, but we will, of course, focus next week on what is happening. And we have Ngozi Anyanwu with us also, and again James Scruggs, Tamila Woodard, Nigel Smith Kent make it. I hope he will come another week. Woody King, who for 50 years ran a theater, a Black theater company. Let's see what's happening. Jonathan McCrory from the National Black Theater, and the great philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy, who will hopefully tell us a little bit about art and why do we need it, and why is it significant. I hope you will join us, and thanks to HowlRound for hosting us, Travis and Thea and VJ, my Segal team, Andy and Sun Young, and to all you of listeners, really thank you for listening also for such a long time. I don't know, moving into a little bit of a longer format, but also today I think was a very important and interesting update, very different from all the talks we had now. This was about working, about finding wakes that were found, new ways we perhaps can move forward, even if everybody is back in the theaters, and that something is changing and has already changed. And but you're right, the election, something has to be done. I think it was Antonio Gramsci, the great philosopher, who said, when the old days haven't gone yet and the new times hasn't arrived, in this chiaroscuro, in this hellish darkness, where it's not clear what it was, that's when monsters do come out. And I think we all have to fight that and be together. And I think that, as you found in this extreme situation you were under, to stop it or not, I think there's also something for this country to find a solution that will make it at least a great option, also made better ways and better forms and better structures. So thank you for listening, also you listeners again, and for taking your time. I know how much is on your every day, and how much digital content is out there, but it is important that we listen to them. And I hope it's also something meaningful inside for you. So with you all, I hope, and next week, stay safe and stay tuned in. And Ashley, thank you again.
Thanks very much, Frank.